Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano. Glad you could join me. Make sure you are following and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, visit the P.A.S. Report website, pasreport.com, and share this episode with others and put it on your social media because we live in extraordinary times. What a day and age, right? The news cycle changes so rapidly. Just 2 weeks ago, a former president and top contender for the 2024 presidential race was nearly assassinated. Yet the media quickly turned the page, right? They didn't want to talk about that because it humanized the former president. They wanted to get it out of the headlines really quickly. And so now we are seeing endless coverage of the anointing of Vice President Kamala Harris to be the Democrat nominee for president. The coverage was swift, and let's be honest, it's a coronation. Just 3 short years ago, the media was criticizing her. And even Democrats were questioning her competency and capabilities. They were questioning whether she was the right pick for the vice president. There was talk of infighting since she became the vice president. She has had a 93% staff turnover rate. Okay, the words used to describe Kamala Harris was soul crushing. Soul crushing. Amazing, right? Just a year ago, they were talking about maybe ditching her from the ticket. Yet today, the media wants you to believe that she is a goddess who can do no wrong. That she is the most transformative person in American politics and she is unstoppable. Even more, they want you to pretend that she is competent. The soulless ghouls in our media, they're such frauds. These are the same people that engaged in a conspiracy and cover-up, lying for years about President Biden's cognitive decline. These are the same fools that told us this was the best Biden ever. The same ones who pretend that Joe Biden is dropping out of the race because it was his choice and his choice alone, that he is a modern-day George Washington. He dropped out of the race to save democracy. What a joke. Anyone who is being honest with themselves knows that the president was forced out of the race by the party bosses. Everyone knows, if they are being honest with themselves, that this had nothing to do with saving what they deem democracy. It had everything to do with power. Because that's what they really care about. They will do anything to acquire and maintain power. It's why they're scrubbing past reports about Kamala Harris. They're literally going back into their articles. They're renouncing what they said just a few short years ago in an attempt to rewrite history. Now that's what authoritarians do, and not for nothing. When Orwell wrote 1984, it was supposed to be a warning, not a playbook, yet here we are. And the one passage that jumps out at me at this moment in time, at this moment in our history, is, quote, every record has been destroyed or falsified, every book rewritten, every picture reprinted, every statue and street and building renamed, every date altered. And the process is continuing day by day, minute by minute. History has stopped. Nothing exists except an endless present in which the party is always right, end quote. And that's exactly what's going on. They want to rewrite history in which the Democratic Party is always right. And it was predictable that many would simply fall in line. Let's face it. In the brave new world we are living in, there is a void of critical thinking. There are so many people that lack this ability. They are unable to think critically. And there are so many lemmings out there that buy into the nonsense. Just look at how brazen the media, government bureaucrats, the Democratic Party, look at how brazen that they've become, that they are the ones rewriting history and changing their past articles. They are the ones making this campaign all about what they call democracy, yet not a single Democrat voter voted for the vice president. There were no debates. There were no discussions. There were no questions as to whether she was the best choice for the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party, I mean, they could do what they want. If the ordinary Democrat voters are going to fall in line, well, that's your problem, okay? Because it was the party bosses that determined who the candidate was and told their voters to shut up and get in line. How's that for democracy? And the fools continue to undermine democratic principles infused into our republic because they have little regard for the people. That's what it comes down to. They believe the people exist to serve them as opposed to serving the people. We the people. It's shameful. But I think even more shameful is how so many ordinary Americans just put up with this crap. They simply do what they're told. What happened in America? Now, the good news is that sooner or later, the vice president's going to expose herself. The more she's out there, the more that she becomes overexposed, the fawning coverage, it's going to lull the Democrats to become overconfident in their candidate. She's going to become overconfident. Her ego's getting gassed up. She thinks that she's quite capable, and ultimately, she's going to destroy her own campaign. But the bad news is that we've lost our way. We see now how the masses are easily controllable. I mean, we've been witnessing that since the pandemic. They'll simply eat up whatever the prevailing narrative is. And that's what I want to talk about today. So everyone hang tight, and we're going to be right back after this quick break. Are you prepared for the unexpected? As a former emergency manager, being prepared is not a choice, it's a necessity, and that's where the Wellness Company comes in. Imagine having the peace of mind that you're equipped to handle any medical crisis, from tick bites to the latest pandemic. The Wellness Company's Medical Emergency Kit is your lifeline, packed with essential medications like ivermectin, emergency antibiotics, antivirals, and more. This kit is your ultimate preparedness solution. The Wellness Company's team of renowned medical professionals, including Dr. Peter McCullough, Dr. James Thorpe, Dr. Harvey Risch, Dr. Drew Pinsky, and more. They are truth-seeking doctors, and they have designed a kit that sets the gold standard for safety and prevention. Don't wait for the next crisis to strike. Visit twc.health/PAS and use promo code PAS for an exclusive 10% discount just for being a listener of this show. Prepare today, rest easy tomorrow. Use code PAS at checkout. Welcome back, everyone. So I want to get into the new Democrat talking point of the Harris campaign and the elites in their little ecosystem. And the new Democrat talking point surrounding the election is whether we choose to live in, quote, a country of freedom, compassion, and rule of law, or a country of chaos, fear, and hate, end quote. Now, just think about this logically for a minute. They promote freedom as they were the ones responsible for eliminating our freedom throughout the pandemic. They are the ones that call for mass censorship. They are the ones that call for an end to single-family housing. They are the ones that don't want parents to have freedom of choice when it comes to failing schools and education. They preach about freedom, yet they want to implement speech codes. They want a disinformation governance board. They want to empower the federal bureaucracy to spy on political opponents. They preach about freedom as they call for the abolishment of the Second Amendment. They preach about freedom as they call for an end to the system of checks and balances and the separation of powers, safeguards that have kept our country, our government in check for the last 230 plus years. When it comes to compassion, how are they compassionate? Millions of Americans are struggling to stay afloat as they send hundreds of billions of tax dollars overseas. They opened the border, leading to a massive amount of human trafficking, migrants being enslaved, raped, and killed on their journey. American citizens being raped and killed by some of the illegal immigrants that enter the United States. You have homeless vets, yet they're shelling out billions of dollars to shelter illegal immigrants in five-star hotels. They want to keep the most vulnerable children in our society trapped in failing public schools. How's that for compassion? They destroyed the economic livelihood of millions of Americans who dared to refuse to get the shot. They forced them out of their jobs. Even worse, to pour salt on the wound, they prevented them from collecting unemployment benefits when they were terminated because they didn't bow down to the petty tyrants in power. That doesn't sound compassionate to me. They approve of children receiving life-changing hormone therapies and genital mutilation through transition surgeries. You want to talk about creepy and weird because that's the Democrat talking point now. That's not compassion. It's sick and it's criminal in my opinion. They have little compassion for girls and women who worked hard to achieve whatever sport they're playing, only to see their accomplishments wiped away by a man. Where's the compassion for these girls and women? They talk about the rule of law. Well, when it comes to the rule of law, remember, these are the same people that referred to the 2020 as the summer of love, the same ones that referred to riots as fiery but peaceful protests. Kamala Harris literally supported an organization that would bail out violent criminal offenders. This is the same party that pushed cashless bail, where criminals are simply released onto the streets to victimize the communities, victimize innocent Americans over and over and over again. Does that sound compassionate to you? Does that sound like it's promoting the rule of law? What about far-left DAs, district attorneys that don't even bring charges anymore? They say crime is down. Yeah, it's down because the stats are being manipulated. Robberies, carjackings, rapes, senseless assaults, they're all up. You have prosecutors dropping charges, declining to prosecute criminals. You have laws that have been manipulated. They're dropping felonies down to misdemeanors. And you now have a system. They actually created a system that pretends the criminal is the actual victim, and the victims are like the criminals. But they want to pretend that they're compassionate. They want to pretend that they believe in the rule of law as they selectively enforce the laws they want against the people they want. Or what about how the bureaucracy has been weaponized to target those they deem as enemies of the state through the National Strategy for Countering Domestic Terrorism? Look at how they targeted those who complained about the authoritarian decrees during the pandemic. Look at how they targeted parents who complained at school board meetings because those parents didn't like their children being indoctrinated with far-left activism. They declared traditional Catholics as potential domestic terrorists because traditional Catholics believe that God created men and women, no in between, no other genders. What about how our judicial system has been weaponized to target political opponents? And then you have the audacity to point to the other side and label them as the party of chaos, fear, and hate? You have got to be kidding me. When it comes to chaos, what's more chaotic than an open border where nearly 10 million people have come through since this administration took office? And it's probably more than that. We don't have the actual numbers. We have no idea about the gotaways, the ones that never encountered Border Patrol. What's more chaotic than an open border? What's more chaotic than a cashless bail system? You want to talk about chaos? Look at the world stage. Look at our withdrawal from Afghanistan, where after 20 years of war, so many sacrifices by the United States and all brave men and women who put on that uniform and served this country, and the Taliban was able to reclaim power within a week of the administration announcing our withdrawal. And the Taliban today is better armed and equipped than it was prior to 9/11. How's that for chaos? Look at Ukraine. Russia's invasion was largely predictable when Russia began building up its forces on the border starting in March of 2021. Yet this administration did nothing. They ignored the signs. They did nothing to prevent the Russian invasion. In fact, the president said that a small incursion was something we could live with. And once the invasion started, what did the administration do? Well, they scuttled a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. They threatened Zelensky that if he signed on to it, America would no longer support Ukraine with aid and military equipment. This conflict could have ended in May of 2022, but they chose to let the conflict go on because they were delusional. They think they're smart, but they're not. They believe that since Russia was on its heels and that Ukraine was winning, that Ukraine would be able to defeat Russia. Meanwhile, it didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that the longer this goes on, the more Russia is going to recalibrate. Russia was always the dominant power in this conflict. And it was no secret that they would adapt to the battlefield and turn the tide the longer it went on. You want to talk about chaos? Look at how China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran have grown more adversarial. They become more emboldened. They have little fear and respect for the United States. The world is now a powder keg under the Biden-Harris administration. Instability is increasing. We're being drawn to the brink of World War III. But the media, the Democratic Party, and the government bureaucrats want you to believe that everything is fine. Everything's fine despite all the chaos around the world. They want you to think that it's less chaotic today than it was 5 years ago. You look at the Middle East during the Trump years. I've never seen the Middle East so quiet in my life. And what happens when this administration takes over? Well, they alienate our allies. They empower Iran by lifting sanctions, providing Iran billions of dollars to fund their state-sponsored terrorism, allow them to continue to advance their nuclear program. They criticize Israel's response to the October 7th Hamas terror attacks. But they do nothing to oust Hamas from power, a terrorist organization that murders innocent men, women, children, and babies. You just had an attack on Israel by Hezbollah where it was 12 or 13 Israeli children were killed, were slaughtered, and yet you hear nothing. Why do you hear nothing? Well, because there's a large wing of the Democratic Party that is sympathetic to Hamas and Hezbollah. And Iran, Hamas, they're not the only ones. Look at Venezuela. Look at what just happened in Venezuela, where Maduro just basically nullified the election, said, I won. Doesn't matter how the people voted. Now, mind you, when this administration came to office, they wanted to shut down all the drilling here in the United States. They wanted to shut down the oil and natural gas production here in the United States. And when gas prices started to surge, they went to Maduro, begged him by lifting sanctions to produce oil and gas for the United States, a tyrant, a dictator. They begged him because they had to keep up that facade that they really care about green energy, and they don't, obviously. Because there's no difference if it comes to climate change. There's no difference if we're producing the oil or Venezuela's producing the oil. The only thing you're doing is making the climate actually dirtier because our technology is more advanced. We could extract the oil and gas in a much cleaner way. Also, you're empowering a dictator and enriching that dictator. Look at the chaos they've created. So when you want to talk about chaos, understand they brought chaos to the global community through failed policies that have only served to inflame the world stage and embolden our adversaries and enemies. When it comes to chaos, look at our crumbling school system, look at our cities, look at our economy and the rampant inflation. Prices up about 20% overall. And if we just look at food and energy, the prices are up even higher than that, between 20 and 60%, depending on the product you're purchasing. Does this not wreak chaos on household budgets where millions of Americans are struggling to survive? Or what about the chaos that we can't even figure out who won an election on election night? You know, all this technology was supposed to make things easier. It was supposed to make things more seamless. Yet when we had paper ballots, relatively simple, we could call elections on election night. Now it takes days, even weeks in some cases, to call an election. They want to talk about chaos, yet this is the same party. The same party that engaged in a multi-year conspiracy and cover-up to hide President Biden's cognitive decline. The same people that forced him to drop out of the race after the Democrat primary, and now they're coronating Vice President Kamala Harris despite her not getting a single vote. That's chaos. But yeah, they care about democracy, right? They talk about chaos, fear, and hate. Let's look at fear. Because when it comes to fear, they're the ones that peddle in it day in, day out. Just think back during the pandemic. Remember when they were telling little children, kids, that they don't want to be the ones responsible for killing grandma and grandpa, that if grandma and grandpa die, it's their fault. Remember when the president said he and his administration's patience was wearing thin and that it would be a dark winter of death for the unvaccinated? How's that for fear? Or how about the never-ending threat of white supremacy despite the fact that today we're a country of 350 million people, and it's estimated that between 4,000 and 7,000 racists belong to white supremacist organizations. Now, if we go back to the early 1900s, when we were a country of 120 million, the Klan's membership was estimated to be about 20 million people. And these people were in high-level positions within our country. So you want to talk about fear. How's about fear of this amorphous threat of white supremacy that they never define, that they never reveal? Well, what are these organizations? Who are the people in charge of these organizations? What's their command and control structure? What are their operational capabilities? It's funny, because if I look at when the feds go after the Italian mob, they put out the whole flow chart of their family. Who's the boss? Who are the underboss? Who's the capos, the soldiers? They have the whole chart right in front of you. But yet, when it comes to this threat of white supremacy, we know nothing. Talk about fear. And then when we look at fear, remind me again, who was the candidate who told the black audience that Republicans wanted to put them back in chains? Which party has labeled their political opposition as the greatest threat to the republic since our founding? Which political party routinely refers to Trump as Hitler to dehumanize him? Which political party says that if he wins, it will be the end of the republic? We won't have any more elections. There'll be no more democracy in the United States. These are the same people that are routinely preaching about how the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025, which I am going to get to one of these weeks, how it's an authoritarian roadmap, despite the fact that if you actually read Project 2025, it decentralizes power and returns power back to the states and the people. When they talk about fear, Democrats constantly play the fear card. They'll scream they want to take away your Social Security. They want to end Medicaid. They want to throw Granny and Grandpa over the cliff. They want to separate children from their parents. Then you look at hate. The Democrats are the ones that push hate. They're the ones that use words like purge, re-educate, deplorable, deprogram whenever they refer to their political opponents. They're the ones that proclaim that America is inherently a racist and hateful country, that we, the people, who are generally good and decent people, that we are inherently racist if we're born white, and if we're born any other color, you're a victim or oppressed. Unless you're Asian, then you're inherently racist too. These are the people that want to tribalize our society, lump us into groups, and then pit these groups against each other. Just look at Kamala Harris's campaign this week. In a week, it's become the most racialized campaign in our history, where you have groups like White Women for Harris, White Dudes for Harris, who have to proclaim their privilege. And just listen to them speak. One, it's condescending. Two, it's an embarrassment. These people should be ashamed of themselves. But what they're saying is if you're not supportive of Harris, then you are classified as a racist. In order to be supportive of the black community, you must blindly accept that Kamala Harris is the Democrat nominee for president. You must blindly vote for her without asking any questions. They have no shame. They view everything through the prism of race. And this kind of division is manipulative. Everyone should be suspicious whenever anyone attempts to exploit race for political gain. So the truth is that they're the ones that peddle in chaos, fear, and hate. They use it to acquire and maintain their power. It is that simple. The truth is they traffic exclusively in chaos, fear, and hatred. They weaponize it to seize power, and they want to maintain their iron grip on it. They sow discord, they stoke paranoia, they inflame prejudices within our society, manipulate the masses because they want to further their far-left agenda. And their entire strategy revolves around fracturing our society, exploiting these fractures, creating turmoil so that they can consolidate their control. It's a climate of perpetual crisis that they manufacture. And rational discourse dies when that happens. Authoritarianism thrives when that happens. And that's what we're witnessing. Notice that they're not really talking about policy. They're throwing stuff out there. Oh, universal pre-kindergarten, universal college education, total student loan elimination. All that's nonsense, right? Who's paying for all that? Universal health care. Who's paying for all this? So they're not having real policy discussions. If you listen to what they're saying, they don't even really bring up policy. It's more that the other side's bad and you need to support us. That's what their whole campaign is built on. But the Republicans, who were just on the offensive a few short weeks ago, they're now playing defense. And they're not sure how to approach this campaign since Biden was thrown under the bus and dropped out. And I want to look at that when we get back from this quick break. So everyone hang tight. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. So now, as we enter the new phase of the 2024 presidential race with Vice President Kamala Harris, or should we call her Empress Kamala Harris, she's now at the helm of the Democratic ticket. It could change. You never know what's going to happen in the next few weeks, and nothing will shock me at this point. But Republicans are now finding themselves in a unique position, and the strategy for the GOP and the Trump campaign moving forward has to be calculated and strategic. They need to break through the media's narrative as the media goes on an all-out blitz to elevate Kamala Harris to a goddess-like status. And first and foremost, they have to recognize, it's crucial to recognize, that Vice President Harris is not as strong as Republicans think. The Republicans that are in a state of panic right now need to calm down because she's in a very precarious position. She's caught between two unappealing options. Either she champions the current administration's policies, which have proven to be a disastrous failure, they've proven to be deeply unpopular with the American people, or she tries to distance herself from them. And then if she does distance herself from them, then isn't she effectively admitting their failure? Now, it appears that she's going to try and create some daylight between her and the administration, but it's really difficult to do. She doesn't have the talent to do that, right? She's not a Bill Clinton a la 1994 when Clinton lost the Congress. She doesn't have that type of capability. And what it seems is that the distance that she may be able to try and create is her reverting back to her 2020 platform. And if she does that, she risks alienating a hell of a lot of moderate voters with policies that are even more radical than those of this current administration. So Republicans need to begin to pin her down. But this was a failure on the Republicans' part. I said a year ago that Biden wouldn't be the nominee. And I explained how Republicans need to hone their attacks, not necessarily on Biden. They have to stop using his name. But a year ago, I said they need to start looking at the Democrats in general, tie the administration's policies to the Democrat Party, that it doesn't matter whether Biden's in office or not, whoever they replace Biden with, these are the Democrat Party's policies. They're not going to change. And if they do change, it's going to be even more radical. And that's what Republicans should have been doing over the last year. So for right now, what the Republicans should be doing, the Republican strategy should be to let Vice President Kamala Harris take center stage. The media and the Democrats are elevating her to such a point where she'll never be able to match those expectations, and she's going to become overexposed. And the more she's overexposed, the more the media tries to elevate her, the more confident she becomes, which means the more she's going to speak. And the more she speaks, the more people will be turned off by her. She'll use a lot of words, and she will say absolutely nothing. Remember, there is a reason that the media and Democrats were going after her just a year ago. There's a reason that she had the lowest favorability ratings of any vice president. There's a reason that there was talk about dumping her from the ticket, that the problems were with her, not President Biden. And there was a lot of talk that she's the one that brings Biden down. There's a reason that no one even seriously alluded to a Kamala Harris campaign in 2024, but more importantly, in 2028. Whenever there was talk about 2028 elections, they would bring up names like Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, Josh Shapiro. They weren't bringing up Kamala Harris, even though she was the vice president. There's a reason for that. There's a reason that in a 3-year period, she has a 93% staff turnover rate, because it tells you exactly who she is. And the more she speaks, the more she exudes phoniness, the more she proves she is not qualified to be the president of these United States. The Trump campaign and other Republican candidates, they have to resist that urge to launch personal attacks against her. Don't go after her past relationships with Willie Brown. Don't go after how she rose to the top. Don't call her a DEI pick. That all may seem tempting, but it's going to backfire because you're simply going to be labeled as a racist and sexist. The media is going to scream that this is racism and sexism. And even Democrat voters who don't like her will begin to coalesce around her when you attack her personally. It's similar to when Democrats go after Trump, right? When the Democrats go after Trump personally, the overwhelming majority of Republicans rally around him. Don't do the same for Kamala Harris. Instead, the focus should remain squarely on policy and the results of the current administration, how the current administration has failed the American people, how our lives are much more difficult. In fact, I'm encouraging, hopefully someone from the Trump campaign is listening, but I am encouraging President Trump, avoid referring to Harris even by name. Just avoid it. Don't even bring her up. Just label it the administration. That's it. You just point to the administration and the failures of the administration. This approach keeps the focus on how miserable life has become under this administration. And the key areas to highlight are the tangible ways in which life has become challenging for all Americans under the current administration. Every time Trump speaks out there, simple lines. Do you want to pay more for food or less for food? Do you want to pay more for gas or less for gas? Do you want to pay more to heat your home or less to heat your home? Do you want to live in a world with peace and stability, or do you want to live in a world where we're on the brink of World War III? Simple statements like that reaches people. It wins over independents. It wins over disaffected Democrats. Trump and Republicans should be in every community that they've long ignored to remind the voters in those communities how this administration has put those who shouldn't even be here before American citizens. And if she wins, that it's just going to be a continuation. They're going to build more shelters in these communities. They're going to provide more to people that shouldn't be here at the expense of American citizens that are struggling. And they need to remind the people in these communities that the shelters and hotel stays will continue as long as this administration remains in power, that the Democrat Party has abandoned them, and it's time for them to give Republicans a chance. And if the Republicans fail, then fine, turn your back on them, but at least give a chance to them. That would be smart politics. That's how you win elections. Discuss the global instability of the administration, from conflicts abroad to weakened alliances to the billions being transferred at the expense of Americans. Point out the policies of the current administration. And if they vote for the current administration, well, then the American people are voting for continued failures. But here's the critical part. While pointing out these failures, the Trump and Republican message has to pivot to one of optimism and solutions. Voters just don't want to hear what's wrong. They don't want to hear the problems, okay? They could feel the problems. They don't want to hear it. Pointing to the other side like the Democrats are doing, pointing to the other side and saying they're bad is not a winning formula. You have to point to optimums and solutions. They want to know, the American people want to know, how can our problems be fixed? Outline clear, actionable plans to address the issues. speak about restoring American prosperity, strengthening national security, rebuilding America's standing on the world stage, promoting American values like hard work, family, personal responsibility, love of country, freedom, and liberty. Right now, the spotlight is on Kamala Harris. She's being hyped up, and she's going to be unable to meet those expectations. And the Democrats are growing overconfident. Their hubris will be their downfall. Republicans need to put Democrats on the defensive. Make her have to explain and defend the administration's policies. Make her. And I encourage, at any debate that takes place, the former president should turn to Kamala Harris and just ask her. Just say, well, I will give you my time. Explain to the American people what the Inflation Reduction Act did to reduce inflation. I want you to point to specific policies in the Inflation Reduction Act that actually help the American people. When you ask Kamala Harris serious questions, she will not be able to answer them. She will stumble, she will stammer, she won't. So you have the opportunity to position the party as the party of solutions, as the party of optimism. And if they do that, and they focus on getting out people to vote, they will win. It really is that simple. Now, if you found the content of this episode informative, please give the P.A.S. Report podcast a 5-star rating on any podcast platform that allows it. Take 30 seconds to write a review. And also, don't forget to visit the P.A.S. Report website, pasreport.com. I want to thank you for joining me, and I'll be back next week with another great episode of the P.A.S. Report podcast.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at pasreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.